Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all people, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests, a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel.
As you stand once again at the foot of Mount Sinai, the memories come rushing in like a flood. Not long ago, this mountain was cloaked in mystery and awe. It was here in the stillness of the wilderness that you saw it, a bush engulfed in flames, yet never consumed. You had drawn near barefoot and bewildered, only to hear the voice of God calling your name, Moses. That one word changed everything. He called you not just to believe, but to go. Go to Pharaoh. Bring my people out. You were uncertain. You questioned your worth, your words, your strength, but then came the promise that steadied your trembling heart.
I will be with you, and this will be the sign for you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain.
Now you are here. The mountain looms above you, rising like a throne of granite, 2,000 feet of raw, ancient power carved into the Sinai landscape. You stare up at it, not with fear, but with reverence. You've seen God's power in plagues, felt His hand in deliverance, walked paths carved by miracles, but this mountain feels heavier, holier. Despite the fact that it's taken 45 days to get here, 45 days of weary steps, a pilgrimage paved with pain and protest, each day a new test, each night a prayer for strength, and behind you trails a sea of people you've been leading, free in body but bound in their minds, grumbling over manna and at every sign of difficulty wanting to return to Egypt, and still God led you and these people. You dare not question His choice, but you wonder about His purpose. As your eyes trace the rugged slopes of Sinai, a weight settles on your chest. You pause just as discouragement begins to whisper, the weariness of leadership, the constant questions, the thankless days, but then you remember the fire. Not just the fire from the bush, but the fire that stayed, the fire that followed, that led, that confirmed, the fire that was here. Not gentle this time, it doesn't flicker, it descends thick, thunderous, alive, the skies split. The earth trembles and fire falls. Not on the bush, but on the very mountain itself. It roars, wrapping the summit in smoke and light, a divine storm set ablaze, yet under the fulfillment of God's word. He had said,
Behold, I am coming to you in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with you, and may also believe in you forever.
He had told you to explain to the people,
You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all people, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests, a holy nation.
As those words echo across the mountain and settle into your soul, the weight of what God is doing becomes clear. This isn't just a contract, it's a calling, a covenant not merely for Israel's survival, but for the salvation of the world. God is setting apart a people, not because they're powerful, but because they are His. A people chosen to reflect His character, a royal priesthood to stand between heaven and earth, a holy nation to live out what freedom truly looks like. You realize now you are rescued from tyranny, not just to walk free, but to walk with God. All throughout this process, you found yourself as a mediator, and now God speaks for Himself from the summit. Like He did to Abraham long ago, He now says to Israel in preparation for His request for obedience to His 10 commandments. God's declaration of independence begins with,
I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me.
Before God gave a single command, He gave a reminder of who He is and what He's done. This is the preamble to the law, and it doesn't begin with rules, it begins with relationships. Not obey me and I'll rescue you, but I've already rescued you. Now walk with me. It's not a list for earning His love, but a way of living in response to His love. A covenant born not out of fear, but out of freedom. It's good to have you back. I have in the studio here with me Amy Ratsara, and she is she would, I don't think she would allow me to say this, but she is a legal expert in my opinion.
I would agree with you.
But we're excited about this conversation, especially with the theme of episode 4. And more than just that, she is a wife married to Amy Ratsara and 2 lovely kids, 2 lovely boys.
Yes.
Is there anything else you want to add, Amy?
I think that covers all the bases. I mean, I'm a lawyer. I passed the bar exam.
There we go. One thing I love about Amy is we could talk American history specifically all day long.
That's right.
I appreciate the passion for American history, and for this episode being titled God's Mount Rushmore, what a perfect guest to have on this podcast.
Fit. It's just the perfect fit. We've talked about this a number of times, and we're like, yeah, we got to get Amy on.
Yeah.
So
may I add, that introduction has been one of my favorites so far. Just the magnificence of getting to the point that God is on his mountain.
That's right. This is Mount Sinai.
Yep.
And just to orient our audience, we are in Exodus chapter 19 and parts of Exodus chapter 20. And so how about we dive in?
Let's do that.
So I guess my first question is, as we find Moses here at Mount Sinai, God framing the law, and you mentioned, Garrett, that we have it, the context of the narrative is the establishment of a new nation.
Yeah.
What are some of the principles that you see here being established? Amy, anything that stands out to you at this point in the narrative?
I mean, I think one of the things that stands out is God just doesn't want them to forget. You know, he brought them out of the land of Egypt. He said that I did all of these things with a mighty hand, and don't forget about that. And I think that that's such an important lesson in there, you know, that act of remembering is something that's also something that preserves and something that's important. It guides and it forms. You know, it leads to that sense of identity. So that very first thing, like, you didn't bring yourselves out. I mean, you were there for 400 years. You didn't go anywhere. I'm the one who brought you out. He doesn't want them to forget that.
Yeah, and I think that's a pivotal part of the establishment, like we've been talking about this whole season, the establishment of a nation. And like Amy just mentioned, the reminder of where they were and their helplessness of where they came from.
Yeah.
And now this is where you are, and you're still very dependent upon me.
Yeah. I find it interesting, too, because this is not the first time they've experienced the idea of a nation, right? They've come out of Egypt, and God is connecting those two things, right? I brought you out of a nation that wasn't working, and I'm now putting something together, and hopefully the plan is that this would work, right? But then the question is, based on what principles?
Right, yeah. And of course, for Bible scholars, Exodus chapter 20 immediately rings a bell, right? I mean, that's the 10 Commandments. That's the law of God. We have a lawyer with us today, so I'm really excited to break that down. Because I think, and not to jump ahead, but I think there might be a little bit of a difference here. Maybe it's similar, I don't know, because it seems like God's laws have a lot of love instilled in them. And I don't know how many law books are on your shelves.
A lot's digital these days.
Okay.
That's good. That's good.
I have maybe 2 or 3 that I do flip through in the hard copy book, but most of it's online.
Yeah. So what do you think are the differences or similarities between like the foundational laws that God is laying down here and maybe the laws that this country started with and what we have today?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because there's almost different levels of law, right? So, even we talked in the intro about a Declaration of Independence or something. And that's not necessarily even law in America, Like, I mean, it was the Declaration. It's kind of, things were already going, but it got things going in terms of starting things out. And it was a statement of ideals. But it's really not until we get to a constitutional convention and they make the supreme law of the land.
Yeah.
And like, this is how the federal government is going to work in these United States of America. These things are reserved for the these powers are reserved for the people. These powers are reserved for the states. And this is how we're going to separate between those different things. And so I think when you're looking at that and you're looking at this, where are we? We're kind of at that very far back step. Because after that, I mean, a lot of the states probably already even had laws enacted. They already had things going. But then certainly after that, after the big supreme law is passed, that's when all these other laws come into place. So thinking about the 10 Commandments and that it was almost, I mean, I don't know if it's fair to make it an equivalent to
Yeah.
the Constitution, but just kind of, these are like the bedrock principles. These are bedrock values that need to be instilled. And some of them have to do with your relationship with me, and some of them have to do with your relationship with others. And,
Yeah.
I do think obviously that's a very unique aspect compared to the world we live in today. We're talking about a nation that ultimately was a theocracy.
Yes.
Not what we live in today.
Yes.
and
Very
all
different.
of that.
Yeah.
But in those 10 commandments, but I think the other interesting aspect of it is like, because of those first 4 commandments, it's very personal. Like when we talk about the law, it's a lot about regulating external conduct. Or at least, like I think we mentioned this, I do criminal law. And so, you can't necessarily criminalize how a person thinks. You criminalize how they act on it. There ends up being some sort of action that happens. But God, he's not just talking about the external, how you interact with each other, whether it's not lying or not coveting or not committing adultery. He's also saying, don't have anyone who gets in the way of me with you. And so there might be a national aspect to it, but he's also talking about like this spiritual reality is something that's different, and it's between you and me. And so I think that that's just something worth considering.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what you're saying there is that if that relationship between God and myself is not functional, then that begins the breakdown of the rest.
I think there's a possibility for that. Absolutely. I do think they feed into each other, but I think that it's also a distinction between how a lot of, at least in the society we're used to living in, we're the 3 of us are in America right now, like how that is. Like we don't necessarily, or we shouldn't be trying to regulate what's going on that individual internal conscious heart level.
Yeah.
We're trying to get outward compliance, like so that you're not interfering with other people's rights and stuff, or
Sure.
Everyone's free and happy. But when God is giving this law, he's saying, okay, yeah, there's some of those, but I also have some stuff that's between me.
Because he's God and he
Yes.
can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love what you said. Like, I forget exactly how you said it, but like, we can't or we don't want to criminalize the thoughts, right? But just the actions.
Yeah.
And I want to sometimes criminalize people's thoughts. I'll be very honest.
Yeah, well, I mean,
You want to step into an area that doesn't belong to you.
Sometimes I'm like, that's just wrong.
yeah, I mean, and there can be dangerous thoughts out there. Like, I think it's an unpopular thing to say, but there are dangerous ideas, and I mean, there's ideas probably that people of in different areas would say, like, we hold dangerous ideas, but that's not necessarily the problem, like, at least in this country, in theory, there's the value of the freedom of conscience. But once that freedom of conscience moves to an action that impacts other people, like, that's when the state gets to come in and say, no. But God, he's like, well, but if you are part of me, we also need to talk about what's going on in that head and that heart.
Got it. Man, that's interesting.
So this relational level that we're talking about is, I mean, it's at the beginning of the 10 Commandments in Exodus 20. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
But I love what Exodus 19 says. It's there starting in verse 4. I mean, it starts a little bit before that, but I'm going to jump in at verse 4 here. He says, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, which I believe is a reference to the plagues.
That's right.
Right? And what happened in the Red Sea. So I protected you. I'm powerful. I mean, 400 years of slavery, justice finally came.
Yeah.
And then he continues, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, that's interesting. I was reading in a commentator about this a little earlier. So, and this happens, I'm not a bird guy by any means. Maybe there's some people that are listening, but apparently the type of eagle that lives in the area around Egypt, when the eaglets are hatching in the mountainous areas, when it's time for them to learn to fly, they are about the same size as the parent or the mother eagle. And in order for them to learn to fly, they're big, but they're wobbly and they're overweight because they're not, babies are.
Yeah.
And so to learn to fly, their mother pushes them out of the nest and they free fall, man. And you can see videos of this. Like they free fall and then the mother gets under them, catches them, brings them up, then they drop again. And they go through this process over and over and over again until they start, okay, I'm starting to learn to fly. And I think this is just a beautiful example of what Israel's going through.
Yeah, I also appreciate the imagery of an eagle.
Well,
right?
yeah,
I mean, we could make another connection here
If Ben Franklin had his way, it would have been a turkey. But
Well, that's what I was going to mention. Like, America almost had the turkey as its national bird. but yeah, I mean, I think there's quite a bit of significance here with the symbolism, right? Because an eagle is a protector as much as it tries its young, right? In this case of flying, but an eagle takes a lot of risks. I heard someone tell a story once of a helicopter that came too close, too close to an eagle's nest.
sure.
And the eagle was diving into the blade of the helicopter to stop it from hurting the
Get out of
chicks.
here.
So again, that imagery of God intervening into the lives of the Israelites to save them from tyranny, like there are so many things that we could pick out here. That's so important. And then what you said about God pointing out that you've seen what I did with the Egyptians. Again, like to me, what that highlights is don't forget what happened to the nation that abused you. As we're establishing this new nation, right? Don't repeat the same thing.
Yeah, don't become the oppressor.
Don't become the oppressor.
Yeah. I think it's also really interesting as you keep reading down in that passage. He's almost citing his credentials, right? Like, this is what I did. This is why. I mean, he's not being humble, right? I have a hard time bragging about myself. My husband's even more like humble than I am. I have to like brag for him. But like, even though we know God is like humble, like he's bragging about what he did with the Egyptians. And then he says, now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then this is going to be the result of that. So he's trying to induce the children of Israel into saying, look, you did leave the kingship of someone else, and he was a really bad king. And I got you out of there in an awesome way. But I'm asking to be your king now. And that comes with things to obey. That comes with things to follow through. But you should be able to trust me because look at all of these amazing things that I had. And I think that, a lot of times we think that freedom means the absence of law or the absence of rules or the absence of any kind of constraint on me. But often the most freedom that we experience is living within the rule of law. I mean, that's why we argue for the rule of law, that when we live within those parameters and they are properly constructed, you can experience your greatest freedom. And I think that that's what God is proposing to them. I want to establish this holy nation, but it's only going to work. You're really going to only experience it if you agree to follow me as your leader and listen to and obey my commands.
And I think that's powerful.
I like that you said, the credentials of God. And you could argue that God, he kind of hides his glory. I mean, he does, because if he had showed up in full glory,
that would have been...
it's over. And we'll have an episode about that a little bit later. But, I mean, he also doesn't restrict his presence from their sight. Like, he is obviously there in a way. I mean, with the way it describes it in Exodus chapter 19, I mean, the ground is shaking. There's thunders. There's smoke. There's fire. Don't touch the mountain or you'll die. So, like, God is not messing around. He's showing them who he is and that he means business. But at the same time, he's also declaring these principles of, but I'm on your side. I'm on your side. There's nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah, it's interesting. Reading further there, Amy, to add to what you're saying, that phrase, for all the earth is mine, right? That highlights his domain. It's like there's not a single place you can go, not a single place that you can touch that doesn't belong to me, right? So again, and one of the thoughts that's circulating in my mind now is that when God highlights the fact that I brought you out of Egypt, and then adds all the earth is mine, I wonder if in that he is also trying to tease out of their hearts a sense of gratitude. So obedience in response to what you did for me, based on gratitude. You see what I'm saying? Like, you don't tear down something that you appreciate.
Right. I think so. Like, you're trying to instill that loyalty, that love, that it's anything motivated by fear is never going to go well. But if it's motivated by that love, that appreciation, that gratitude, it's a wellspring from which obedience can flow freely and happily.
I heard it today put something, I forget who it was, but they said, God is not looking for compliance. He's looking for commitment, which is a big difference, right? Compliance is almost forced. And commitment is, I'm all in.
Yeah.
I'm in with this.
Yeah.
Right. I think Israel is to that point of commitment, and God is showing himself as worthy of being committed to.
Yeah. Man, that's fascinating. All right. So how about we read further. Verse 6, and ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and an holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel. So God is giving Moses this message, and God highlights what he wants out of this transaction, right? And we say transaction, but the word there is covenant. What I want out of this covenant, the end result is a nation that is holy, and a special treasure to him that's mentioned also in verse 5. I wonder if you had any thoughts on that, any of you guys.
Yeah, I love that. And I think with that verse, going back to something Amy said a minute ago about appreciation for something, right? I think that's something that I've found here, at least in America. Often you find people that are newly immigrated to the States, right? And maybe have just gotten their citizenship. And they are some of the most dedicated people to true freedom that I've ever talked to, right? They don't take it for granted because they've seen it. They've experienced what life is like without it. And here the children of Israel, now they're experiencing freedom for the first time. I think they want to be this holy nation. I do think that that's something that they want. I mean, they say a little bit later, like, God, what you say, we'll do it.
Yeah,
like
that's true.
That's what we want.
Yeah.
But they are not a holy nation before that Mount Sinai right here.
Right.
Yeah, up to this point.
No.
Yeah. Their reaction and responses.
No.
They don't look the part at all.
No.
Yeah. But it's interesting that dream that God has for them there, that, you know, not just a holy nation, but a kingdom of priests. Because, you know, as we get in later into Exodus and we talk about the priesthood, we think about like Aaron and his sons and all. But God's like saying, no, not just them. Like, I want a kingdom of priests, of people who interact with me, you know? And, you know, you take it forward and you think about even in the New Testament, it talks about like that now we're all a priesthood of believers, you know? And that idea, I think it goes all the way back here about that kind of relationship that God wants to have with his people, that just that kind of representation, you know, it almost, I mean, it's not a perfect analogy, but it does remind me in a way of like when you live in a country of laws and you're a lawyer, it's like, it's something special to be a lawyer. Like you're helping to keep the system that's keeping this running because of the administration of justice that you do. And in the same way, like God's saying, I want a kingdom of priests, people who will take these spiritual realities and continue to be working in them. And that he's saying that about the whole kingdom. Like, I just think that universal applicability of it to the whole kingdom is just fascinating.
So I'm dying to kind of ask a question here.
Go ahead.
So the verbiage that we've been talking about, you know, we've been mentioning this new nation and the ideals for this nation that God has set for them. And then I think Amy just used the word, the dream, the dream for this nation that comes from God.
Yep.
And you don't have to be a Bible scholar to know that Israel,
they don't
live up to the ideals.
That's correct.
And in fact, in some cases, you could say that Israel down the road does become the oppressor.
Yeah.
So what is it, guys, like both of you, like what is it about nations that have this great ideal at the beginning?
All that the Lord said we will do.
Like, all that you say we will do, like every man is created equal. Like we have these lofty ideas that I think are great. Like that sounds amazing. And then it just collapses. And not just here in our country, but like God is there with the Israelites and they're still collapsing. So what's the deal with these great ideals that we can't seem to manage as nations?
That's such a good question. Amy, I'll have you go first.
I know it's a big one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do think maybe even, let's go back to that beginning again, you know, like,
sure.
I think that's one of the reasons God reminds them, like, I brought you out of Egypt and this is how I did it. And remember that. Don't, like, you know, it's like at the beginning of every time he talks to them, he's reminding them of this. And I think when we start to forget about, you know, our origins, about our source, and all of those values, it's easy to depart from them and to then also be confident in ourselves. So at least for the Bible part of that, I would feel more comfortable saying that answer.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
I think that, then we can get, you talk about all the different blessings that God also offers. It was in some of those early verses, that those would be the result of faithfulness, but then thinking that that's the result of something that I did or we're entitled to, as opposed to it being something that is a gift, and something that is to be held in trust and properly shared. I think that that's where you can start to get yourself into trouble.
Entitlement.
Yeah.
That's a tough word.
Yeah, I think we got to break that down too. Well, to add to that, I think also we have to identify the fact that these ideals were not created by men, right? They were created by God. And I think part of the struggle with the Israelites was they wanted the ideals of God without God in the picture.
Okay.
Right. So, for example, on Mount Sinai, when the law is given, it's like the relationship is broken in the process of the law being given, with the golden calf, which we'll talk about in one of the episodes. And I think also about Samuel. That story when Samuel comes before the people and they're like, hey, we need a better plan, right? We need something, we need a substitute, something that could replace the theocracy because it looks like this is not going well. And they chose a king instead of God's ideal. So I think a lot of times what happens in the mind of men, and when I say men, I mean general, like us, we begin to think that we know better than God as we put these things together. And also, I think just in the human frame, like we're not capable of living up to any ideals we state.
Agreed.
Like we always break our promises. I mean, in every single relationship, if we're not careful. I mean, it's it's interesting, right? Because sometimes you're like, hey, I'll be back at 4, right? As simple as that. But then you show up at 4 or 5.
Your Jamaican is showing.
My Jamaican, my being Jamaican right
6
now.
o'clock.
Yeah, you're like 4 hours later, So I think, one author states, and I think this was Ellen White, like all of our promises are as ropes of sand. Like they don't mean anything. So I think the moment we disconnect from God, then what results is our own hypocrisy, right? That begins to show, and that begins to burst at the seam. And I think that's where the problem sets in, because like, I'll add to this. I'll say like the idea of America being a Christian nation, right? Where does that idea come from? Where did it start? And when did we see it being a Christian nation?
It starts in the Bible, Jermaine, don't you know?
Oh, boy.
Prove it. Prove it.
I think that was the ideal, right? Like, I think the ideal was, we talk about the Declaration of Independence, we talk about the Constitution, and I think the ideals are beautiful ones.
Yeah.
But even the ones that penned those documents that I think are near and dear to us, were breaking those very same things that they wrote down and died for.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's a startling number, and I didn't look it up before coming on here, so I don't want to misquote it. But if you do the Google research and you look about the number of people who signed the Declaration of Independence who owned slaves.
That's crazy.
Staggering.
It's staggering. Like it's a very large portion of them, and say all men are created equal with these inalienable rights, and yet we don't. I mean, I think it's something we're still reconciling today. I mean, we still have not achieved that in this country, and it's a very real problem.
Yeah, I wonder too, like even that, because what that speaks to as well is the symbolism, right? The symbolism has it has this ability to double speak. Because, for example, the Declaration of Independence, right? You're signing a document that speaks to independence for everybody, but at the same time, you own people that are not independent. Like, they don't have that freedom. And then I know in the episode, we kind of talk about a bit, like the title is God's Mount Rushmore, which that says a lot too, because there's a double symbolism, right? It's the establishment of a nation where we have leaders that are depicted there, but it's on a land.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
That others, when they see it, they weep. Right. But for us, when we see it, we celebrate. So how do we balance that out? Right. How do we process that? Right. A flawed nation. Right. We can accept that reality, but at the same time have gratitude for what has happened. Like, how do we balance those two things?
Well, I mean, I think that's what you have to do. It's the balance of it. So I think you have to recognize the flaw I think trying to live in ignorance of that is not going to do anything to get us closer to those ideals.
Absolutely.
And I think that recognizing, and Mount Rushmore, so not only is it on land, but when you look at the people who are on Mount Rushmore, like each of them in their own way show the contradiction in what this country is, that it stands for these, but then this is what we're going to do. This is a republic, but actually we're going to send the Navy all the way to the Philippines. Or we're going to, enslave people, or we're going to do all of these different things. And so I think the first step is that being honest with ourselves, whether we're talking in terms of like our citizenship or whatever, being honest about what our history is, and accepting that there are ideals, and in order for me to achieve those ideals, I got to be honest that we haven't always been there. And and I think we need that on an individual level. We also need it at a national reckoning level. But I think there's like the flip side to that with God is that, he's the only one who he's on his own mountain. Like he's a mountain.
Amen.
It's his mountain.
Like they are scared of him, and like he is not inconsistent. So like to me, it's like, praise the Lord. This is why it is worth serving God. Because at the end of the day, any human nation is always going to end up disappointing me. It's never going to live up to its ideals. You cannot look. I would be interested to see if people would make a pitch for it, for a country that's perfectly lived up to its ideals. Yeah. But God is the one who's always faithful. The problem has never been God. The problem has been always His people holding up their end of the covenant.
Yeah, and you mentioned something I think that's important. God is always at the pursuit of truth, right? Yeah. And I think that should be Christian people's pursuit as well, is to get to the bottom of what truth is. And recently, the last few years, there's been a push to almost like delete certain parts of history, right?
Oh, yeah.
And certain things that maybe are in the closet of our country shouldn't be taught in schools because it maybe damages the reputation of our country and things like that. And there's been terminology that has even been made for this. And I'll just call it out, like critical race theory, right?
Yeah.
People say, well, there's history books that demonize America. And there probably are history books that do demonize America and have an agenda. But at the end of the day, like, what happened? That's what history is all about. Like, what legitimately happened. Take as much bias out of it as you can, and owning up to what is good and what's bad. And so, that for me has been difficult because I'm a really I'm proud to be an American man.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And anyway, like being honest with yourself about, those people on that Mount Rushmore that I have, and I don't use this word lightly, idolized as a child. And I was taught a very painted version of those people. Like, hey, they founded national parks. And, they started the revolution and they did those things and it's great. But at the same time, like they were human. And that's what I love about the biblical narrative, like going back to Israel. Dude, Moses was a stellar leader. Like one of the best. He's the George Washington, except better for Israel. And the Bible's clear about his shortcomings.
It's honest
about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's there for a reason.
Man, I agree with you on that. And I think that's the issue, right? Because for me, as an immigrant sitting at this table, I do remember when I became a citizen and how exciting that was, right?
Sure.
Like, so as much as America has its flaws, like people want to be here, and I want to be here. And a lot of times the desire for honesty is strong on the side of the immigrants because we see it. Like when I grab the history books and I read, I'm like, wait a minute, this was here?
Yeah.
Right?
50 years ago?
So, yeah. And you're like, wait, what? And then you ask and then you bring up the conversation and immediately it becomes political or becomes like you're ungrateful for the opportunity that you've been given when all you're asking is for a conversation. But again, going back to the issue of humanity, right? It's not just America that we see this. We don't see it just there. We see it in the church too.
Preach.
Because the history of our church, right? That's another area where we try to whitewash a lot of what has happened. When you bring up those conversations, asking for authentic, honest discussion, it's like, no, right? It's framed as ungrateful, ingratitude, again, or it's framed as doubt, or you don't want to be a part of this, when really you're just asking for a moment to have a honest dialogue.
Distraction from mission, like, oh, we can't talk about it. We just need to be focused on mission.
Yeah.
But this is getting in the way of mission.
Exactly. Because it's a big stumbling block. It's like we gotta somehow get beyond this. And And that's, again, going back to why I think this chapter in the Exodus story is so important. You know, like God is saying, look, keep me at the center of what we're establishing here. Because the moment you veer off, we're going to find ourselves in these areas of hypocrisy, dishonesty, and all the things that we're talking about, right? Because those things relate to how we treat our neighbors. You see what I'm saying? Just interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting too. For those of you that are reading this narrative along with us in Exodus, sometimes it can get confusing about how long the children of Israel are in certain places because they're wandering. Yeah. So in my mind's eye, sometimes I'm like, okay, so they stopped by Mount Sinai for a couple weeks and then they moved on. But here at Mount Sinai, they were staying at Mount Sinai for close to a year. So they pitched their tent and they were there in the presence of God
this whole time
for about a year and seeing him on that mountain at the center of them every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And still, I mean, we're not there yet, but and still they struggled.
Oh, mercy.
Yeah.
There's a text here that I wanted to bring out as well. Man, where was it where they said to Moses, like, we don't want God to talk to us?
I thought you were looking for the verse that says, and do not go near any woman.
No,
I can leave. No.
That's not the one I was going for. I was trying to find another verse.
Yeah, there's that whole
I think that was
right?
an interesting feedback to God's desire to be close, right? And that's what I was going to say. And I think part of our reaction too in the formation of the idea of a nation is that oftentimes that's our reaction, right? We're like, God, I want to be close, but not so close, right? I choose, and in this case, it's so interesting to me that they made this choice. It's essentially saying, God, we want distance. We need an intermediary to have this conversation when God wanted to have the conversation with them. So they made a hero out of someone, and that person being Moses, which Moses did not mind. That's the role he's been playing all along. But I wondered how it would have read differently if God was given the chance to address them directly.
Yeah. I think, and this is kind of a question comment for Amy, like, so God is showing up, we've discussed that, and he kind of gives his authority behind the law and ideal. Is there any, like, I don't know if there's like a historical example of this, but how does law usually go, or how is it accepted when the authority behind the law is deemed as weak? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wouldn't even say weak, but just like, do they have the authority to execute that law? You know, and it comes from different areas. So, you know, I deal mostly in the courts. So normally we think of laws come from the legislature, and the check on that is that the governor or the president or whatever, depending on where you are, is the one who either signs off on it or they veto it. And then it can be reviewed by the judicial branch or whatever. But then sometimes you see different branches of governments doing different things. So, you know, we're all currently in the state of Michigan. And, and again, not trying to get political or anything like that, but an example would be 5 years ago, in the midst of COVID, the governor making decisions about whether things should be opened or closed or whatever, and a lot of strong feelings about whether that was an appropriate law because of where it was coming from.
Sure.
And I mean, surely it probably also would have had some blowback if the legislature had done that, or the courts had said, you know what, we're closed. Although the courts did close, the courts themselves, not, you know, obviously the whole state. Likewise, sometimes a Supreme Court, whether it's a state Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, comes out with a law and says, this is what the law is. And I mean, I think we've seen it in this country many times, lots of backlash from both directions, depending on what that decision is that comes out. I forgot why you asked me this question.
I'm just like, how does law work when people don't respect the authority at all?
Yeah, no, and then I think it can start to break down, because at the end of the day, it's an agreement between people to follow the law, you know? And so if you don't respect where the law comes from, like, there's no reason to follow through with it, and things start to fall apart. Yeah.
Is that, well, I guess that kind of brings the question for me. is that sufficient for law to function, an agreement between people?
I mean, that's the big question, right? That's the great
Ideally,
American
right?
experiment. We see how
Right,
it's
like-
been going. There have been highs
And we
and
have
lows.
evidence of it not working.
Well, you think about parenting, right? So
Yeah.
like with my son Mav, and if you listen to this like 20 years later, bud, I'm sorry for bringing you up all the time. But anyway, like when I communicate with him, like, hey, we're pretty rough with each other. Like we have like WWE bouts. Like we just wrestle and go at it. And then when he's with his mom, he thinks he can do the same with her. And he can't and he shouldn't.
Yeah.
And so I'll explain to him like, hey, the reason that we're more gentle with your mom is because, and I give him the reasons for that. We want to be gentle to your mom, right? Because we love her. And so that's the understanding. And that's good enough for him. Like, oh, I love mom. And so I'm going to be gentle with her. And I love you. And because I love you, I'm going to be rough with you. Because that's how we do things. And that's enough for him. And like for kids, at least at that age, that's enough. And then when they get a little bit older, they're like, why?
How does it make sense?
Yeah, I don't care what happens to the other person.
I'm all about my play and
But I think that's
enjoying
the
it.
ideal, right? Like, I don't want to hurt that other person, so I'm not going to do that. It's enough for me.
Yeah, that's interesting. Right. I guess, again, like in my mind, I'm thinking like in the context of the Ten Commandments, right? Because because God frames it with both, right?
Yeah.
Relationship with himself and then relationship with humanity. And then I think we should jump over into the commandments themselves. But I wonder if in God's mind, he understands that the other half separated from the first half is always insufficient. Right. So if law is simply an agreement between you and me, right, that's not going to work out the way we expect it to.
I get it.
Because
Yeah.
again, going back on the basis of promises, right, the fact that we break those all the time, it's like that's not, it may function for a time, but eventually there's going to be a breakdown. Right. So, and do you understand what I'm saying?
I get it.
Yeah. So I just wonder, like, why did God give the Ten Commandments and he begins with a relationship with himself? Like, let's start here, right? You shall have no other gods before me.
Well, I think we kind of skipped over something in between the two.
Okay, go ahead.
Bring it up.
Give me a second.
Well, and also, too, he doesn't start with that. He says, you know,
I am the Lord.
God,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
am the Lord who brought you out of the land. Yeah.
which is the Declaration of Independence, except much better.
Yeah.
Oh, where is it? I mean, after he was saying all of these things, and then they said, yes, we will do all of these things. You know, like they gave their assent to that proposition. All that the Lord had, here we go, verse 8, chapter 19, verse 8. All the people answered together and said, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do.
Yeah.
And Moses reported the words of the people to the Lord. So we see there's a facilitation, there's this agreement. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, I think fair question if God knows he's saying, but like they're basically saying, we're consenting to be governed by you.
Yes.
We've just elected you, God,
Yes.
as our supreme leader.
Yes.
And so now God said, okay, you have made me your president. You have made me your king. You have made me whatever,
Yeah.
authority.
Yeah.
Here's my first 10 laws.
That's a good point.
That's a very, very good point. I mean, actually, that's a powerful point when you consider the fact that God would even honor their choice. You know, that's the freedom of choice. Having done what he did for them, he's still not forcing them to respond. Because, there's that in human nature. Like when you do something for someone, there's a sense of entitlement. Like you expect them to do something in return. But here God is giving them the freedom. You choose whether you want to elect me or not as your ruler, your supreme ruler.
And
Which
before
is
that,
fascinating.
before that question is posed, he frees them from slavery. He feeds them every day.
Yeah, that's right.
He gives them water. He gives them Moses, in whom they're beginning to trust.
Yeah.
So he gives them reason and logic into why they should consent
Yeah.
to that government system.
Yeah.
Love, one, devote.
Yeah. I've showed up and I've done this.
Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah.
God's campaign.
That's a way better campaign
It
promise.
was no mudslinging either. It was legit.
Yeah.
God is not like, put me in and I'm going to get these things done.
Yeah, no
He's like,
gerrymandering.
he got it all done. And it's like, here's why. Yeah. That, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so how about we jump over to 20?
No, before we get there,
Okay,
I think
all
it's,
right.
I think it's also interesting too. Like and there's not a direct correlation, but there's very much like second coming language here. I mean, there's a trumpet that blows, right?
Oh, yes, that's
like
right. Yeah.
There's smoke. There's God's voice. So it's very much like a coming of God to the people.
Yeah.
And, I like to relate this, and I think we've talked about this briefly before, but the response to the children of Israel to the presence of God is telling. Because they're fearful because they don't know him. They're fearful because they don't know him. And, when Jesus comes again, there's going to be two responses to his glory as well.
Yeah.
There's going to be a fear from people that don't know him and call for the mountains and rocks to fall.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a group of people that are just so excited because they do know him.
Yeah.
And so the condition of the people is very much shown. And yeah, they agree that he is God, but there's still an innate amount of fear in them.
Can I add one more thing before I jump to 20? I know I'm pushing to go to 20, but I love the fact, because you said something that triggered this thought. I love the fact that God came close to give the law. Like he didn't lay the law down from a distance.
Yeah.
Like that, again, it just shows the intimate relationship that he desires to have with his people. Like he actually comes down to tell them what he wants from them. He's not stuck in a room writing a document.
Yeah.
And then sending it out. It's like, hey, I'm going to come where you are to explain to you what things should look like between us.
Yeah. And I guess to draw it back to another place of scripture that this reminds me of is when you go into Matthew chapter 5. So between here and then the second coming, Jesus goes up on the mountain and he sits down and he begins speaking and he gives the Beatitudes. And then, and when you read it, those chapters 5, 6, and 7, like this is the constitution of Christianity.
Exactly.
This is what it means to be a Christian. And kind of a part of what we're talking, it has nothing to do with being an actual nation, but it has everything to do with what's going on in your heart.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Mount of Blessings is the second Sinai. It's the
That's
the
exactly
law.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the regiving of the law.
Yeah. And once again, Jesus doing it himself. He didn't wait till after he went back to heaven and, gave it to Paul in a vision or John in a vision or something. It's early in Matthew.
And back here in Exodus, we've talked about this a little bit before, but this is a mixed multitude and it's called that for a reason, right? We talk about this country being a melting pot all the time. And this group of people, they were slaves, they were Egyptians, and they were everybody in between, free men and bond.
Yeah.
And God calls them all people.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? He calls them all people, no matter what they were in their, I don't want to say past life, but, in the previous few years. And so he has a term of respect for everyone. He deems them all as truly people.
Yeah.
When I think that maybe when this nation was started, when they said all men are created equal, well, sure, when you consider not everybody people.
Somehow you had to change the language in order to make that work.
Yeah, exactly.
There's something else that I thought about too, as Amy was speaking earlier, which is such a good point. The idea of rebellion when laws are laid down from a distance. Like that's what started the nation of America, right? The British were trying to force laws.
Yeah, King George is across the pond. He doesn't get it.
Yeah.
No representation.
Yeah. And the same thing happens like in our relationships with our family and friends, like if you're trying to administer discipline from a distance, it really doesn't work.
Or if you feel like you're not being listened to, like you're not even listening to me,
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. So it begins, right? And God, this is Exodus 20, verse 1. And God spake all these words saying, that idea himself saying it, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. And you had mentioned earlier, Amy, the idea of remember what I did for you. And then he begins verse 3, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Okay. Have you ever thought about why in that order? Like, why is that the first, first command?
So many levels to that. I think there's like a practical level. Like they came out of Egypt where they had like a deity for everything.
Yeah.
And they have been there not for 40 days. They've been there for 400 plus years.
Yeah.
And, for any of us, you become inculcated with wherever you are. This is a side note. I don't know if you guys know this. When I was in law school, I was a super nerd. So I also did a master's in history while I was there.
Did you?
So
Okay,
this is why Garrett and I get to talk about history a lot. But I took this class and my professor made a really interesting point in one of our discussion sections. And he's like, if you go to a country that it's like a Buddhist culture, it doesn't matter if you're Muslim, it doesn't matter if you're Christian, if you're Jewish, or if you're something else. You're a Buddhist Christian. You're a Buddhist, whatever. If you're in America, you're a Protestant whatever. So you're a Protestant Jewish person. You're a Protestant Buddhist.
Wow.
Because the culture gets so inculcated with that worldview, it impacts even the way that your distinct way of being is. And so I think, the very first thing God had to remind them, look, I know you've been here for 400 something years. You've had these influences. There is no God for the river. There is no God of frogs and of gnats and of all these different reasons why he was bringing the different 10 plagues.
Yeah.
I am the only God. That was my first thought. And then the second thought is, someone explained it to me this way once, that when you look at each of these 10 commandments, it's like a value, an attribute, a character trait of God that can't be changed. So when God says, have no other gods before me, it's because there is no other God. I am God.
Yeah.
And when you go through and kind of break it down that way, like you look for the thing behind it. What is God saying about himself? And that's why he's giving this commandment.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I think there's a big correlation. It's not so much answering your question about the order of why this is germane, but like you mentioned at the beginning, it says remember.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't say that in explicitly, but it says this is what I've done. So it's bringing the remembrance back. And then it talks about, these gods, and it gives descriptions of the gods. Heaven, sea, below the earth, right?
Yeah.
Which is very much related to the Sabbath. The Sabbath is the only commandment that starts with the word remember. And then it talks about, resting, and it talks about creation. And I think that one of the biggest safeguards that we have against idolatry is
the Sabbath.
The thing we have here.
Yeah.
It's the remembrance of where God has brought us from. And it's also a day that we remember why we're here, and it separates us from our attempted idols, because we all have them.
Yeah.
We all have idols we like to set up. And so I think there's a huge similarity between the way that this first commandment is set up and the way the fourth commandment is set up. Because in the modern world, the greatest protest against slavery or modern day slavery is Sabbath.
A day of rest.
Day of rest.
Yeah. Because slavery is there's no rest at all. You're always working.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what Pharaoh did. Like when they came up with the idea of let's go into the wilderness to worship, he's like, you are idle.
Yeah.
That's why you want to go. That's interesting.
And man, doesn't that sound like culture today? Like even apart from, and I do believe there's slavery very real, like still happening today.
Yep.
But even apart from that, like we've almost created a culture of it.
There's no rest.
Yeah, there's no rest. Even if you don't have someone telling you, but maybe you do. Just like it's, I gotta go. I have to hustle. Like I got 3 jobs, or like I'm working from like whatever time to whatever time, and there's just no time for rest. But that's not what God told us to do.
Yeah, it's actually a shameful thing. Like when somebody asks you how you're doing, especially a colleague, there's a pressure to say busy. Because if you don't say that you're busy,
that is true.
then it's a signal that you might be lackadaisical or just straight up lazy.
Yeah.
And so, and this is the same in ministry too. Well, how are you? How's ministry? Busy. That's always the answer every single time. And I do the same thing because it's true. But man, there's a huge danger in this busyness.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point that you guys are making, because that's true. The idols that we have look different.
Oh yeah.
We worship the Benjamin, or sometimes idolatry can be our work.
Could it be our country?
Oh, Lord have mercy. Yes. The
For
answer
me,
to
it
that
was.
is yes. Yes.
For me, it was. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it's interesting because I see people in that, going on that point, I see people more passionate about politics than they are about their religion,
Dude.
Yeah.
and their relationship with God.
Yeah.
Right.
We put as much energy into spreading the gospel. Then, yeah.
If around election time, if we decided to spread the gospel instead of
Brother.
doing the stuff we did.
Well, can I add another layer?
Please.
Yeah, go ahead,
So, like,
please. Go ahead,
So
please.
we're talking about idolatry now, right? Because that's nothing. You should not make for yourselves a carved image.
Yeah.
But and going back to this idea, it says something about God. Like, I'm irreproducible. So
Oh.
when you're making a
yes,
God
yeah.
out of
That's right.
your work, or you're making an idol out of you're trying to have that thing
Yeah.
reproduce me, but
Facts.
I am not reproducible. I am above any of these other things. And I think when we think about it that way, why do I think that this thing is going to solve everything when like there's something even above it?
That's a powerful point. I'm attaching that point to the fact that how God introduced himself, right? He's the God of deliverance. So it's very interesting how idolatry works, because we often attach idolatry to solving some great problem that we have. You know, so the God of rain deals with drought, right? And so in essence, that point that you're making is so powerful, is that God is saying, in terms of him being irreproducible, he's saying there's nothing else that can deliver you the way I can.
Oh, yeah.
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 Nothing else. Work will not fulfill you the way that I can. Like nothing in this world will be able to deliver you the way that I can.
Yeah, because a lot of these gods, or then and today, they kind of offer a false haven, right?
That's right.
So I work a lot because I'm petrified of what happens if I don't have X amount of money in my savings account.
Yeah.
And so if I work, that's providing a safe haven for me and my family.
Yeah.
Or, you know, my mental health is so bad right now. If I just sit through some entertainment for a few hours, it's providing my brain a safe haven to just veg, right?
Yeah.
And you know, haven and heaven are very similar words.
Yeah.
And the only thing close to a safe haven that we have in this world is Sabbath.
Yeah.
I keep coming back to that.
Yeah.
And really, the only other safe haven that we should have is an institution given by God, and that's church.
Yeah.
And I think that's why church hurt is often the worst kind, because it is a God-ordained safe haven. And when it's not,
That's difficult.
it hurts, and it's a reflection in many people's minds on God.
Yeah. Man, that's fascinating. It's interesting, too, when you think about the golden calf, because the refrain there was, this is the God that brought you out of Egypt.
It's an antichrist. Well, and that's Barabbas, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. That's right. That's
here's
right.
an earthly one that will give you,
These things.
you want a savior
Yeah.
over the Romans.
Yeah.
Here's a zealot that is going to try and do that. And here's Jesus, who doesn't care about that earthly kind. And the people say, well, we'd rather have this kind of nationalistic freedom.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we find a replacement for everything that God gives for our benefit. You know, I mean, there's a replacement for the Sabbath too, you know, and I know we'll talk about that at some point. But like we choose our own day instead of the day that God gives to us. Like we're going through this process of replacing what God has given to us, thinking that it's going to be better. And it never works out that way. It just never works out that way. But I think drawing that, coming closer to home too, I think when we go through our days and we're exhausted, and that thing that we turn to, right, in those moments that we do that, we're also saying, this is the thing that brought me through my day.
Yeah.
Like that's what brought me out of my Egypt, right? So for some people, it may be, I mean, pornography, right? That's what you turn to.
Addiction,
It's like addiction, like those substances that you're turning to make you feel better. That's you saying that this is my God, right? This is the thing that's going to deliver me here.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the ways to look at these commandments is it's a safeguard against idolatry.
That's right.
And this is kind of another question for Amy. Like, you know, even Jesus says that not one jot or tittle from this law will change.
Will be changed, yeah.
Right?
That's Matthew 5.
Yeah, that's going back to Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah.
Man-made laws change all the time.
Yeah. Not the laws of the Medes of the Persians so much, you know, like we know about that. That's why Dagon got stuck in the lion's den. But yeah, no, I mean, even you can look at recent laws in America, like going back and forth, and it's whiplash. What even is the law right now? You know, regarding different areas, and again, whether it's from the legislature or a new administration or the courts are coming in and saying, hey, actually, the law's a lot different now. And I mean, I've actually had to deal with that at work, where we've dealt under one paradigm, and then our state Supreme Court says, actually, that's not how it goes, and we're applying it retroactively. So now you're trying to have to go back and redo all these cases. And I mean, there's great arguments on both sides of whether or not that's the right thing. I'm not going to weigh in on that here. I'm not even saying what that is, but here, but you know, like, yes, that is a huge difference where, like, but Jesus said not one, but and again, I think when we really understand what God is talking about in the 10 Commandments. He is expecting some sort of behavior. Like, I don't want to downplay that at all.
Sure.
I don't want to over-spiritualize it. But at the same time, when you get back to what its essence is about the relationship he's trying to develop with you and why, and the relationship with each other, that's where we understand what Jesus means, that there's not one jot or tittle that's going to change from this. Because that law he gave there is the same one I'm giving on the Sermon on the Mount, and the one that we're going to be living in heaven.
Yeah, that's right.
Amen.
Amen to that. There's another thought, another question I want to ask as well, Amy. Are there times when laws are written by legislators for their own benefit?
Oh, sure. I mean,
Oh, mercy.
you know the term of like cut the fat or cut the pork.
Yeah.
You know, like that idea of it is, you know, especially like when you talk about the United States Congress, there's like 400 something representatives who are in there, 100 senators, and they're like, okay, I'll pass this bill if you give however many million to build a new bridge in my district, or however many million to bring this factory to my district, or for sure, there's a lot of not to get into too many things, there were a lot of apparent potential conflicts of interest, even with the transition in current administrations in the United States now, where like, well, wait a second, why aren't we going to have these federally built charging stations anymore, and they're going private? And who's the company that runs the private?
Oh, mercy.
And where does he work now? Or not anymore, but so for sure. And that's not just here. I mean, and if anything, again, I am also very thankful. I'm in between the two of you. My mother was an immigrant, so I'm married to an immigrant. So I was born here, but also I'm very close to that whole, I understand what this means. And I mean, hearing stories from my husband, hearing stories from my mother, my grandmother, it's also bad other places too, in terms of like, I am going to take this law and it's for my benefit. And now as I'm talking, I'm thinking like, what is God's benefit with these laws? Like, it's not what.
That's my point. That's what I was getting to. Yeah. That's
let us right there.
I think it's so fascinating to me, right? Like when you look at the fact that when we write laws as human beings, and including legislators who are responsible for writing just laws, write them for their own selfish interest. But here you have God writing laws for our benefit. You know, like, what does God get out of this? Right? In this case, like, everything here is good for us, right? He brought us out of slavery. And our response to him is having no other God, which secures that relationship that continues to guarantee our safety going forward.
Yeah.
And then treating each other well, like the latter half of the 10 Commandments. I just find that fascinating, that God, in giving the law, is not self-interested.
Yeah. And I guess, you know, it's easy to talk about the cynical things, but like, if you do see that in law also, like, I mean, that's the ideal behind public service, right?
Yeah.
That like, I am serving for the greater good.
Yeah.
And then there's questions about whether it really is the greater good or not. But, you know, that's what that kind of reminds me of. Like, God is that ultimate example of a public servant, of doing the work for the greater good, because he literally gets nothing out of it. He's nothing other than the love that he's always wanted from his people. And I mean, maybe that's the ultimate answer, is like, when it's really in our hearts and it's only coming out of a place of love, that's all God has ever wanted.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes us a little bit leery of trusting God, is because we've been burned so much by tyrants in our world today. You know, I'm sure you've seen movies before or read books where someone will come up and say, "I am the law," right? I think of old westerns.
Why does that sound familiar?
You know, old westerns where someone, you know, the sheriff comes into town, "I am the law," and points to the star. And it's usually an abuse of power almost any time that someone says that. But in this case, what we've discussed in Exodus 20, this is a transcript of who God is.
Yeah.
Like, he is the living being of this law. And that makes that my first reaction to that is uncomfortable, because that is never good without checks and balances in the human way of looking at things, right? Because you always need checks and balances, because Abraham Lincoln said it, power corrupts, right? But not with God. And he even puts checks and balances in his own way. And that's the whole great controversy in the millennium that we can talk about at a different time.
Yeah.
But he's the only one that is trustworthy with this kind of power.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, right? Going back on what you're saying there too, I feel like God, the idea of him putting limits on himself right? In the Exodus story, because here he doesn't go close to the people. He goes close enough where they could hear him but not destroy them, right? So you see a God who puts the checks and balances on himself,
Right.
Where you don't find that in government, right? Like that's the when you excel, when you achieve that kind, and I see it in my country, right? In Jamaica, I see it all the time, right? One of the biggest worries often is when foreign countries invest in Jamaica, the question is, where does the money go?
Of course.
Right? And usually you see what happens, like bigger houses are being built for the politicians, but the roads are the same. Like nothing changes. And now, like the last time I went back, it's so interesting to me because the last time I went back, the roads were finally being built.
Sweet.
But they're being built by China.
Sure. Oh. Yeah, same thing happens in Kenya. I was just there,
And then I asked the question, like, wait a minute. So what happens here? And then I found out that Jamaica has to collect tolls for, I think if I'm not mistaken, it's like a ridiculous number of years, right? And that toll money goes to China.
Yeah.
And by the time they get the roads are in disrepair. So again, self-interested. It's just humanity. What do we do? But I think here, as we wrap things up, I think here we have to, I guess one of the ways that I would put this is I think God has my vote.
Yeah.
There's no better government. You know, nothing can compare to that.
And as much as I love my citizenship in this country, and, Paul says, pray for the king. So I do that. And as much as I want checks and balances, like whenever there's a Republican president, I pray for a Democratic House. And if there's a Democratic president, I pray for a Republican House, right? And you want those checks and balances. But, regardless, our citizenship is in a better country.
That's right.
Yeah.
You want to close us out, Amy?
Yeah, and I just think that there are many things we try to replace God with. And at the end of the day, none of them will do it. But God promises so much when we just follow him with that love. So learning to love him with our whole heart.
Yeah.
Jermaine, just quickly before we close, there's some pretty great work that Amy does with some other women in our church.
That's right.
They have a podcast.
Yeah.
Ish. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about it, would you?
Yeah, not a podcast, on Instagram. So we're like the Instagram, not even queens. We're not that great at it. But we like to have conversations not unlike these about where does our faith intersect with the world that we live in. And so check us out at Some Adventist Women on Instagram. And we do conversations on there. And we would love to hear what people have to say.
It's good to listen to.
Yeah.
That's right. And as usual, friends, I'm Jermaine.
I'm Garrett.
Thank you for listening to God Inc.
Thanks for coming, Amy.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, guys.